And for today's business matters, the Trump administration's tariffs on fuel imports from Canada will affect some parts of the US more than others, and that's because different parts of the nation get gas, diesel, and crude from various sources. Experts say the Northeast and West Coast will likely see gas prices rise sooner than other regions. Canada remains a prime source of oil for the US. Last year, it shipped in 1.5 billion barrels to the American market. Analysts say the rise in fuel costs will not be immediate. Commuters are also benefiting from relatively low gas prices. According to AAA, gas prices in the US have remained steady this week and have dropped about 2 cents per gallon since January. 401ks are becoming a rainy day fund for more Americans. That's according to the Wall Street Journal, citing Vanguard Group, which administers 401k type accounts for millions of people. The journal reports a record percentage of people took early withdrawals from their 401k last year, when nearly 5% of account holders took them. Now compare that to the previous record at about 3.5% in 2023. The pre-pandemic average was around 2%, and people took early withdrawals to prevent foreclosures, pay bills, medical bills, other emergencies as well. More than a third of those who took hardship distributions in 2024 did it to avoid eviction or foreclosure. That's down from 39% from the year before. Others used their early withdrawal to buy or fix a home. Delta is the new boarding group being called up for a more fuel-efficient future of flying. The airline is partnering with startup JetZero to accelerate the development of a blended wing-body commercial aircraft. The main body of these aircrafts are wide and blend into the wing, allowing the entire structure to create lift. This would allow the aircraft to burn half the fuel of today's jets. Delta will provide operations and cabin design input as part of its Sustainable Skies Lab. The takeoff goal for the blended wing-body aircraft is 2027. Commercial flights would come years later. Widespread economic uncertainty as Macy is mid-turnaround. That's what executives described, as they said even affluent shoppers are waiting to see how tariffs and inflation play out. The department store giant expects sales to decline again this year. It's forecasting about $21 billion down, about $1 billion from the year before. There were some bright spots in its results that suggest Macy's turnaround could be working. Sales were up at its so-called first 50 locations, the stores it's testing to see if sales will grow by devoting more resources to them. And Utah has become the first state to pass legislation requiring app stores to verify users' ages. If the bill becomes law, parental consent will also be needed for minors to download apps onto their devices. And TD's Sal Mercogliano has more on this.
On Wednesday, Utah became the first state to pass legislation requiring app stores to verify users' ages and get parental consent for minors to download apps onto their devices. The bill is headed to the desk of Governor Spencer Cox. App-centric companies like Meta, which operates Facebook and Instagram, is in contention with App Store giants Apple and Google over who should be responsible for verifying ages. Meta and other social media companies want app stores to carry that responsibility. That's amid criticism that social media companies don't do enough to make their products safe for children or verify that no kids under 13 use them. Governor Cox has until April 1st to either sign or veto the legislation. Apple and Google are among a number of tech companies that help support the Chamber of Progress, a tech policy group that lobbied Utah lawmakers to reject the bill. Last year, Apple helped kill a similar bill in Louisiana that would have required app stores to help enforce age restrictions. A spokesperson for the Chamber of Progress called the measure a tremendous encroachment of individual privacy that he said places a heavy burden on app stores to ensure online safety. Republican Senator Todd Weiler, the bill's sponsor, argued it's a lot easier to target 2 app stores than it is to target 10,000 app developers. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
And orders are coming in for U.S. toy makers. The New York Post reports that the new tariffs on goods made in China, Mexico, and Canada have directed demand to a small group of toy manufacturers in the U.S. For example, Simplay 3, which makes outdoor playhouses, sandboxes, and more, has a factory in Ohio. The company said it needs to hire more workers and have signaled a deal and signed a deal for educational toys that were being made overseas. Simplay 3 declined to name the companies it's working with and notes the trade-offs in its increased labor costs in the U.S. Another example is Pi Games, a 3D printer. At a toy fair, the company boasted that its products are made in the USA and aren't subject to tariffs. And there's no doubt where Elon Musk stands on privatization. President Trump's advisors said at a conference he believes the U.S. should make private anything that can reasonably be privatized. And that includes the U.S. Postal Service and Amtrak. During a technology conference yesterday, Musk referenced the vast train transportation systems in other countries, calling Amtrak a sad situation. Musk also said a service had to have the risk of going bankrupt in order to have a good feedback loop for improvement. Musk acknowledged that a lot of these changes would require acts of Congress. Taiwanese chipmaker TSMC is going big in the United States. Earlier this week, the world's largest contract chipmaker announced its intention to expand its investment in the U.S. by an additional $100 billion.
Because of clients' demand, so far all of our production lines this and next year are fully booked. Even the production line that will be built the year after next is booked too.
The latest round of funding builds on the company's ongoing $65 billion investment in advanced semiconductor manufacturing in Phoenix, Arizona. TSMC plans to build 3 new fabrication plants, 2 advanced packaging facilities, and a major research and development center. The chipmaker said the project marked the largest single foreign direct investment in American history. Its CEO added the company's investment plan would not impact the chipmaker's expansion in Taiwan. Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te called the investment plan a historic moment for U.S.-Taiwan relations. And it's going to be the only solar panel with all American-made components. That's what tech company Corning said when it announced a partnership with U.S. solar manufacturers Suvina and Helene. This is a meaningful milestone in the effort to establish a U.S. solar manufacturing sector that can compete with China. Helene is based in Canada but produces panels in Minnesota. Suvina is a cell maker based in Georgia. And Corning and its subsidiary make the solar industry's raw material in Michigan. The companies say the new module contains a solar cell with up to 66% domestic content, and that's the highest percentage on the market. European automakers shares jumped today after President Trump gave car makers a 1-month reprieve from his 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico. The European automakers and components index was up around 1.5%. Porsche, Volkswagen, BMW, and Volvo were up between 2.5% and 3.5%. Mercedes cruised over 4%. European car makers have said they may move some production to the U.S. depending on the tariffs. Trump has also floated potential reciprocal tariffs on Europe that could hit next month. Auto giant Stellantis has pledged to manufacture more American-made cars. The company thanked Trump for the tariff pause. Stellantis shares jumped 1.5%. Tariff threats on semiconductors into the U.S. have already been made, but will consumers or companies pay for them? That's what Malaysia's trade minister and local companies are trying to figure out. The Southeast Asian nation is home to a large semiconductor industry and is one of the top exporters of chips to the U.S. President Trump said he intends to impose 25% or higher tariffs on semiconductors. The trade minister said the government has not discussed what it will do or whether it will provide financial support or offset tariffs. President Trump says he'll establish a new office of shipbuilding within the White House to revitalize the industry and bolster American naval strength. Earlier, I spoke with Sal Mercogliano, Ph.D., Maritime Historian at Campbell University for analysis. Take a look. What do you think the main concern is here that led to creating a White House office of shipbuilding?
Thank you for having me this morning. I think it was a long time coming. There's been a pronounced effort to really highlight the fact that China, in particularly, has been dominating the shipbuilding and the shipping industry. The U.S. has allowed it to really slack off, not become a major player. And what we've seen is issues in U.S. shipbuilding, particularly over on the Navy side. But more importantly, on the commercial side, the U.S. only represents a very small fraction of total ship construction. Less than 0.5% of ships are built in the United States compared to almost 70% in China.
Can you go a little bit deeper into that? How does the U.S. shipbuilding compare with China's? You said China is dominating, so how does it compare?
Yeah, if you look over the past 25 years, China has become really the dominant force in shipbuilding. After the end of World War II, the United States began to cede commercial shipbuilding to other nations. We saw Europe, and then we saw Japan, for example, become major shipbuilders. In the 80s, it was the Korea, but then in the 2000s, it was China. And a recent report by the U.S. Trade Representative noted that China has really undertaken a program to dominate the shipping industry. And it's not just in the area of shipbuilding, it's crews on board vessels, it's the registry of vessels, it's ownership of vessels. And so they're using all types of assets to really corner the shipping industry. For example, almost nearly every shipping container in the world today is built solely in China, and they control the leasing of those containers out on the global marketplace.
So Trump actually proposed special tax incentives in driving shipbuilding growth. Is that going to be effective?
I think it's going to be necessary. I think there's going to be more necessary. I think that's one of the reasons you heard the creation of this Office of Shipbuilding. I think there really needs to be a look at what exactly we're going to see. We've got several initiatives underway at the same time. Congress has pushed through a Ships for America Act. We have the U.S. Trade Representative who's pushing forward these taxes on Chinese-built and Chinese-owned ships coming into the United States. And now this Office of Shipbuilding, along with a proposed executive order from the White House, will begin the process to really begin shipbuilding as a major component in the United States industrial revitalization.
Is it necessary for the U.S. to compete with China? Is it a relevant question to ask in today's geopolitical environment?
I think for a long time, the U.S. took the kind of the policy that we really didn't need to compete in the commercial shipping world. It was fine to allow other countries to basically build our ships. We were fine with this concept of open registry, ships being flagged in Panama, Liberia, and the Marshall Islands. And so what we got from it was a lot of low-cost transportation. It was very good for the economy. It was good for world trade. We've seen world trade increase dramatically over the past 70, 80 years. However, what we're seeing right now is some contention on the high seas. You have issues like the Houthi in the Red Sea, issues in the South China Sea. We're seeing the Russian dark fleet, these vessels that are carrying just Russian fuel around. And I think there's a lot of concern that we're seeing a bifurcation, a splitting of the commercial fleet that's out there from one that is all under this kind of UN developed world nation fleet to segregated fleets and regional fleets. And that means that the U.S. has got to get back into the commercial shipbuilding field.
All right, Sal, we're out of time today. Thank you very much for coming on. It's great to speak with you.
Thanks for having me.
Ultimate Fighting, Wrestling, and now Boxing TKO Group Holding is entering the boxing promotion ring with Saudi Arabia's Turkey, Alaska, and entertainment conglomerate Sleep. UFC President Dana White and WWE President Nick Khan will run the day-to-day operations of the new venture. White referred to the promotion as a new league. A statement said it will provide a premier platform for both leading boxers and up-and-comers. Right now, boxing is made up of several organizations, including the World Boxing Association, the World Boxing Council, and more. Each have their own rules for championship belts. Spring break season is officially underway. The Transportation Security Administration says the peak spring break travel period runs from March 6th through the 24th. TSA is expecting air travel passenger volume to increase by more than 5%. Arrive early and be prepared for long lines. Also, a quick reminder ahead of the summer travel season, be sure to register for your real ID by May 7th. All U.S. travelers will need a real ID to fly domestic unless they bring a passport. Layoffs have surged to levels not seen since the last two recessions. Global outplacement firm Challenger, Gray & Christmas reports that Job cuts jumped 245% in February, with over 170,000 layoffs. That's the highest for the month since the Great Recession 16 years ago. The federal government accounted for the bulk, cutting over 60,000 jobs across 17 agencies and over 41,000% increase from last year. The cuts are linked to Trump's push to shrink the government. The president has described the federal government as bloated and wasteful. Challenger cites DOGE-related cutbacks as the top reason, affecting over 63,000 workers, including federal employees and contractors. Washington, D.C. has been hit the hardest, losing nearly 62,000 jobs this year compared to just 60 in 2024. The unemployment rate is forecast unchanged at 4%. Okay, now to Wall Street. Stocks finished lower on Thursday today, with the Nasdaq confirming it has been in a correction since December. It was weighed down by market jitters over the current uncertainty surrounding U.S. trade policy. Now, President Donald Trump announced today that goods from Canada and Mexico, covered by the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement, will be exempted for a month from the 25% tariffs imposed earlier this week. Now, the development comes just a day after Trump exempted automotive goods from the tariffs. And with that, everything on today's Business Matters.